It's my pleasure to host this panel with this very distinguished group of panelists about mobile innovation and what's on the horizon, a very big topic to cover. This is a very interesting group to have here because they've all seen mobile from a number of different perspectives, from the investing side, from the company operating side, and also from the design and consulting side. So I think this will be a great discussion going forward. Let me introduce these panelists to you. Sitting closest to me is Mike Abbott. He's a venture capitalist at Kleiner Perkins, Caulfield & Byers, which he joined in 2011 in the digital practice, and he's already made a number of investments in big data companies and other startups. Prior to joining Kleiner Perkins, Mike was the vice president of engineering at Twitter, which has seen tremendous growth and is about to go public, and Mike was a part of that. And before Twitter, Mike was at one of the early smartphone companies, which was Palm, which we remember fondly. And earlier, Mike also worked at Microsoft in online services. Next to Mike is Guy Bar-Nahum, who is the vice president of the Mobile User Experience Lab at Samsung in Silicon Valley. His brief is to take Samsung beyond just the hardware, and I hope he'll be talking to us more about that during the course of the discussion. Samsung is, of course, one of the largest smartphone makers in the world. And before Samsung, Guy saw how mobile developed through another very fast-growing company, Apple, where he was the director of software in the iPod division. Next to Guy is Tim Morey, who is the assistant vice president of the innovation strategy group at Frog Design, which works with a lot of technology clients, among others. At Frog, Tim works on product innovation, design, engineering, and business strategy to help the commercialization of products. He's researched areas such as the personal information economy, and one of my favorite new phrases, digital exhaust, which I hope we will talk about. And prior to Frog, Tim worked at companies including Aricent and Wipro. So to the topic at hand, mobile innovation. I thought we'd just kick this off by talking about where we are in mobile innovation today. Since we are in the middle of a World Series, we can even put it in terms of what inning are we in with mobile innovation. And we will start here with Mike, and I would love it if you guys can jump in.
Well, I feel like, if we had to put it in baseball terms, probably like we're in the third inning. Okay, I think we've certainly seen a lot of innovative products emerge. I mean, whether it was Palm with smartphone originally, up into the iPhone and what's going on in the Android ecosystem. But to use it in an analogy or a framework that's actually more in line with my thinking, because I'm not a real big baseball fan, I think when I look at the iPhone, it kind of feels like when I was a kid and had an Apple II Plus. And it was just kind of this huge new world of opportunity. And it's just remarkable to see the types of companies that come into our offices that have the opportunity to leverage the distribution of iOS. That didn't exist 10, 20 years ago. And just being able to build these incredible experiences that tie both the software, the hardware, and the services up in the cloud. And so it just feels like we're now starting to see, not that we haven't before, but kind of another wave of interesting services and software and applications that are being built. And it just feels very early to both myself and our firm.
Kai, would you agree?
I see it with different tone, but the same picture basically, which we're stuck. Apple's stuck, Samsung's stuck. There was that beginning of time world in 2007 when iPhone disrupted everything, and when phones became not to talk or to connect to people like Nokia would put it, but to literally separate ourselves from other people and be inside the phone with touch. The value of mobile is in its apps, right? These are just fancy containers of apps, both tablets and phones. And that's a major crisis for Google, which is the OS vendor, or Samsung, which is the OEM. We're nobody, right? The real touch point is all about those kids that go to your office and start companies that ride on top of us and have a relationship with the user and have that decommoditized value that is mostly about data sets, and it's a web entity kind of paradigm of maintaining relationship with users. And today, OEMs and OSVs just don't have, they're nowhere, you know? And we're really, really frustrated by that, right? And we're going to talk about ways to try to disrupt this place where we're stuck on. You can see the energy coming down from the market. You can see how the differences between iPhone 3 to 4 was awesome, and then 4 and 5 is just nothing. And the same thing happened to Samsung, slightly after that. Galaxy S2 and to 3 was huge. And then we stuck in some incremental plateau. And we're terrified by that. So you're going to see a lot of desperate attempts to get us out of this morass, while all the good stuff is taken by the people that Mike is paying to, the startup guys. So yeah, it's not good.
Tim, is it really not that good?
Yeah, before we dig into getting unstuck and looking forward, though, I think it's worth pausing for a moment and looking back, you know, and just how far we've come in what an incredibly short period of time. I mean, it's 6 or 7 years, I think, since smartphones in the current incarnation of the black rectangle came out. And we're now at, I think, about 60% of US smartphone penetration. And 4 out of 5 new phones being sold are smartphones. So, you know, we've gone through the early adopter, early majority. Now we're in the late majority. All consumer products follow that S-curve of adoption, the BAS adoption curve. And this one has been incredibly fast and incredibly steep. You know, it took televisions, 40, 50 years to get to this point. And so the pace of this adoption has just been incredible. And the societal impact. I reached for it first thing in the morning, and I was relieved. A recent Pew Trust survey showed that I'm not alone. There's a large percentage of people check their email first thing when they wake up in the morning and reach for the phone. And you know, how it's impacted our lives and the way we interact is fascinating. I work with a lot of runners and cyclists at Frog, and we were debating and comparing applications for tracking our runs. And one of my colleagues confessed that if she goes for a run and she doesn't take her tracking device with her, she somehow feels like that wasn't a proper run, you know, that she didn't record it so it didn't happen. And think about that for a minute, right? That's your first life, your physical life, your existence where you meet and greet and interact with people, and your second life, the digital life, that's recording. You know, it's gotten closer and closer because we carry these things with us all the time, and they track us and map us. And at that point, they've really collided. So I think we've come a tremendously far way in such a short period of time, with such profound impacts on how we live and work.
Well, let me ask Mike and Tim, do you agree with Guy's notion that we're sort of stuck right now in mobile? I mean, we all know that our eyes kind of glaze over when the latest iPad or whatever is announced now, because it doesn't really move the needle as much as it used to. I mean, do you think that we're sort of stuck in terms of the hardware innovation, or?
I don't think we're stuck in the services and software layer. I think we're constantly seeing new innovative things that, you know, last year you wouldn't have imagined. I think, you know, Snapchat, I think, is a good example of that, where, you know, using photos or images as a form of communication, and in this case, ephemeral. And is how quickly these things take off. And you know, at some level, it's really not about the smartphone, but it feels like it's about the smart camera. I don't know about you, but I actually don't use my phone all that much. But I use a lot of the other services and applications around it.
It's not really a phone, right?
Yeah, and so I guess I can understand why some of the larger players feel stuck, because it is difficult to move. But we certainly don't see any shortage of people with very, very novel ideas, you know, whether it be in health, you know, in fitness or in healthcare and hospitals, that are kind of looking at the next wave of, okay, what does it actually mean to take some of these consumer trends and bring that into the enterprise, or bring that into the hospital? And you know, there's a higher, I think, really thanks to Apple, there's a higher bar now for what that experience needs to be on the enterprise side. And so, you know, I'm really excited about it. And at the same time, I think that one of the implications of that is that the design and the user experience is really becoming so core to the success of these products, which was not necessarily historically the case. If you go back 15, 20 years, it was primarily the engineers who actually understood how to actually use Microsoft Foundation classes or whatnot to build these UIs. Now you have these amazing tools where without an engineer, a designer can get close to a prototype, and you combine that reality with Amazon Web Services that can provide you an infrastructure, you get really close to actually getting a product out and trying it on, millions of people thanks to distribution platforms like Google Play and the App Store.
Yeah, I think that democratization is quite extraordinary, and if you take it out of a US context globally, the first 2 billion of us on the internet, started with browsers, with Gopher and Mosaic, if you go back far enough, and we sort of had this progression, and we have a bunch of mental models and expectations that we bring to bear on the mobile web. But if you do research in places like Brazil and India and China, for a lot of the next 2 billion coming online and using mobile devices, they have a completely different set of expectations, and they don't have that baggage of history that we bring. So the ability to make those tools accessible and democratize those applications is just amazing. And I think we'll see really interesting things come out from other than Silicon Valley.
The problem is that we have an extremely weak platform. And then we have these unbelievable, shiny, beautiful, vertical apps that are really not mobile entities, they're web entities. So you have this mismatch between companies, OEMs, right, that know how to make things really well. And then you have the people who are actually owning the connection with the individual. They know how to do data mining. They know how to build data sets. And they create, that's the value, right? That's the decommoditized value, right? Mm-hmm. And because of that, really, the stretch between the have and the have-nots of the mobile industry, you can see a very fragmented atolls, apps, a lot of apps all over the place. And that creates, it's not the best solution that it could be, that you can imagine. These apps, like web entities, are very selfish. They're very predatory. They're transactional. They're trying to monetize. They're trying to actually have segregated data sets, right? They're not trying to collaborate in order to create synergies. And that's because of the nature of the platform, mm-hmm. right? You need to discover the app. You need to know about the app. You need to install the app. These are things we don't really wish for. And we want to lock the user into us because there's a zero-sum games between apps. So this state of affair is just how we got here historically, right?
But I think isn't that also an opportunity, though, because these platforms have many users' identities.
Yes,
too many. Those identities, are embodied through your experiences on the iPad, the iPhone, maybe Apple TV. Look at Samsung. I think if my numbers are correct, you guys sell 1 out of 3 TVs in the U.S.
Right.
And so I could imagine a scenario where you've got Samsung tablets, phones, TVs, but through that single identity, deliver a novel experience based on the data on that individual.
And that's what we want to be, right? Yeah. So you have this fragmented, web cloud kind of heavy, that's where the gold is, that's what the value is. And then you have that dumb touch point, right? That actually has a lot of potential to give to the web guys because we know where you are all the time. We know, we have way better quality data. Like Facebook has this manual thing about who's my friend, who's not my friend. The phone knows who you're calling to, and it's dynamic. And the social graph that we have is infinitely superior to what Facebook has. But there's that disconnect. The disconnect of the historical accident of how we got here.
Yeah, those silos will have to break down. And if you think about any application you have, if you add location to it, it becomes a lot more useful. So if you have a Yelp app and you're looking for a restaurant, if you add location, you know where it is. And that makes it easier to use. But as you add sort of more sources of information, that experience becomes richer and richer. And I think Samsung and some of your peers in the industry are at that point that you can break those silos down. I think Google now is another really interesting example where it looks at your calendar, it knows your location, it knows the time of day, and so it can serve up things to you that are going to be more relevant to you. And I think we'll see more and more of that across applications.
I totally agree, and it kind of warms my heart because with WebOS, which is what I led the team that designed and developed, we had a lot of visions, and some of those things got out, and some of those didn't, and we kind of know what happened with WebOS. But the notion, to your point, that these platforms have all this sensor data and really know who are you communicating with, when are you communicating, how long are you communicating. That's really your true social graph at some levels. And what we're kind of also saying is that because Android offers up some more of this data than iOS, we're seeing some of these experiences sooner than I think we're seeing in iOS. Like you give an example, there's a whole category of applications around app launchers. Basically, apps that kind of take over your phone and can be Google Now, it can be other app launchers for games. You can't build an app launcher for iOS.
Right.
But this is actually kind of, and who knows how big or small that particular category will build. But we're seeing a lot of these kind of innovative ideas with the flexibility of that platform.
Yeah.
So Guy, is that what you are working towards now?
Yeah,
at,
we
Samsung,
basically
breaking down the silos and having this more sort of all-encompassing experience amongst different mobile
Exactly. So
platforms?
we basically found ourselves in this stable solution that is a local minima. It's not the best place, but it's very hard to kind of tease the situation, such momentum to do that. It's a little bit foolhardy to even try maybe, but we believe that there's a better deal between the OEM that is the touch point to the user, knows the user really well, and it can be the gatekeeper to value that comes from third parties, right? We can actually consume feeds from them, right? We don't have to install them, you know? We can actually be in that strategic position of matching value to value providers through that prism of knowing the user. It's all about knowing the user. That's the only solution we have from decommoditization.
So if you take that through, I mean, you and I had talked about something called predictive assistance. I
Yeah,
think.
that's what you do with value.
Is that what that enables? And can you talk about this sort of scenario in the future if the platforms do
So what
come
do you
together?
do when you're close to someone? There's only two things you can do. You can nag them and give them recommendations. We used to call it ads sometimes, you know, if it's bad recommendations, but it's all basically, hey, discover the world. There's something you don't know, but I think you will like it if I'll tell you about it. So I call it in that nice name recommendations because we're so tired of the web guys just monetizing us on a millisecond level. So I can tell you about stuff, about things around you. The other things you can do is actively assist you with some workflow that you do. This is a little bit more ambitious and more risky. You know how when somebody, I don't know if you have a mom or somebody that kind of very close to you and try to kind of tell you what to do, there's a big downside to be so presumptuous as telling a human what to do. But we believe that eventually these things will get to the level of, they're going to start from the safe areas, right? The things that there's no much downside. But definitely having an assistant, not assistant, but an assistance within your phone, within workflow, based on me knowing you, you know? It could be as benign as knowing that if I walk to my car right now at night, I'm probably going to Palo Alto. I'm probably going to drive to Palo Alto because of you know me, you're with me. And then I can surface traffic and other things that Google Now is already doing. But the end of that arc is really, really exciting and deep. And that's where you get to have an emotional relationship with a product, with a brand. And that's the Apple moment. That's the love, right? That comes from this addiction and dependency that you mentioned. I think we can go way deeper into that very, very good area. So that's what we're trying to do.
Okay.
In Samsung.
Okay. So Mike, on one of the things that you had mentioned earlier was different scenarios with use cases of mobile devices. You'd mentioned healthcare as one of the things that in the future we can see different use cases coming out of. And Tim, I know you're doing a lot of work about healthcare in the year 2020. Maybe we can talk about how in this specific use case scenario, what do you anticipate seeing in terms of mobile devices in healthcare, and how will that usage be different from it is now?
Mm-hmm. I mean, we're certainly seeing a range of different companies emerge around telemedicine. I mean, most physicians and nurses have some type of smartphone or smart device, and being able to remotely provide guidance, and which kind of has a follow-on implication of how do you ensure that electronic messaging is HIPAA compliant. So there's kind of different companies emerging there. If you get outside the hospital, when you look at companies like Jawbone, I think they're doing some very interesting things where you now have a sensor on your body that's tied to your phone through a protocol that's tied to their cloud service to be able to track over time your sleeping patterns, how many steps you walked, you can enter in what you ate, and you're now starting to build a log of your life. And I think this trend towards sensors, and specifically in healthcare, is a really fascinating one. I think at some levels, the smartphone over time will get decomposed into both, I think, smaller, we'll call it computers, both that are internal and external to your body, that will actually help you in health. So there's no reason why, if your body temperature is changing, that that sensor shouldn't tell you, hey, you might be actually fighting a virus. Drink more fluids, sleep a little bit more, even though you may not sleep more. But I want that kind of help. And when I think of the term assistance, I mean, it's easy to think through, I think, the scenarios of, hey, I should leave this meeting now because I'm going to be late, which is awesome. But I'd love to get assistance on the health side. I actually think we're going to have to get that type of assistance. I mean, not to get in the healthcare debate, but I think as over the next couple of years, there's going to be, I think, a higher requirement that we take better care of our own selves and do more preventative type medicine. And I anticipate sensors will play a really key part into this. And I'm really interested in the data that those sensors are generating, because that's what this actually all comes down to. It's the information generated by these sensors passed through some smartphone up to a cloud service, doing machine learning, deep learning to help you come and return that information back to you to improve your life in some meaningful way.
Yeah, I think for me, it goes back to seeing our first lives and second lives blending. So, you used to go to the doctor once a year for your annual checkup, and they would give you a snapshot in time view of, here is your health, here are the things you should be concerned about, and here is how you compare to last year. But if I have the series of trackers that Mike was just describing, and I have my smartphone, then I can have almost continuous monitoring. And the information that I have about myself, my sleeping, my health, my heart rate, becomes a much richer data set. It's not a snapshot in time, it's an ongoing thing. And so we see this applied in a number of applications and companies. And the second part of this is helping people age in place. We just did a program or a study in our Austin studio looking at what are the technologies that we can leverage to allow people to live independently, but have that second digital tracking of themselves going on. And there's some interesting companies. There's one, I think, here in Fremont called Proteus that makes a pill that you can swallow. It tracks. And so, the adherence thing where you understand, are you taking your medicine correctly? Have you been moving? And again, your medical practitioner or your team gets a much richer view of your health and how you're doing.
That's great. Mike, you had mentioned earlier smart sensors. And one of the things, Tim, you and I had talked about was this debate that's going on between the smartphone-centric view of the world and other devices. With smart sensors, we can obviously have a range of different mobile devices. Maybe we can chat a little bit about what is the mobile future? Is it a smartphone-centric future, or are we already seeing, the Fitbits and the Nests of the world, and is that what we're going to see?
I think I take the opposite view to the one that Mike just mentioned, which was computing dissolving into the ether around you. I'm making future predictions is a fool's game, and I know I'm not going to declare that the smartphone...
If you could do that, let me know.
If I say it's the end of history, I know I'm going to be laughed at in a few years from now. But what I see is more and more what I think of as smartphone peripherals. And so all these sensors and devices around you are things that depend on your smartphone for connectivity, for compute, for storage. And they augment the capability of your phone, but they're not necessarily replacing it. And so I think the form factor may change, but actually the power, there's more and more power going to the phone.
So I don't see how that's different from what I've said, actually, because what I'm suggesting is that different applications and services from the phone will decompose, not any of the functionality.
Not replacing the phone.
The phone is still likely going to be the proxy.
Yeah.
That sensor, whatever that sensor is, that actually mediates that information back to some cloud service and comes back and delivers that kind of meaningful area. And so in terms of what are all the different sensors those will actually be, I think we're early. I mean, the home is a full set of sensors. I think Nest is doing some interesting things of decomposing the home and saying whether it be your wireless hub or whatnot, maybe that's the central proxy there. But there's a lot of things in your home that might be able to help you and actually be smarter. Yeah. And I think one interesting area that really hasn't been tackled yet is the automobile. If you subscribe to the fact that whether it be 7 years, 15 years that we have driverless cars, I would anticipate there'll be a new set of applications that are built for that experience. Because one thing that's going on in mobile is all these apps and services are trying to take some of your time. And you get 5 minutes, you have 60 seconds at a bus station. What do? I hope you're opening Twitter and checking Twitter. I don't know what you're doing, but everything is looking for your attention. We're in this attention economy. And one of the last areas of time that we have, I would argue, is the car and when we're actually commuting. So I'm really interested in what does that actually mean? When your phone knows when you're actually driving, but none of the apps or services really change much. So I'm kind of interested to see what happens there.
So what's a phone, right? Again, it's not a phone, right? A tablet is also mobile. What is a mobile device? It's a screen. That's all it is, right? The only reason, the big quantum leap, the beginning of time in mobile is when Steve Jobs said, get off these keys out of here. Because we want, why? Because Apple is a software company and we want the whole, and what is software? Software is pixels. So just give me the whole pixels. And people look at him like he was crazy, but he was right. So you will always have a screen. You'll have a screen that fits in your pocket. That's a phone. That's a handset. You have a screen that fits in your bag. That's a tablet. So you will never break that visual primacy of people into some screen technology. Screen technology is very, very, like battery technology, is very slow moving. So until we don't have something disruptive there, that's the form factor that will stay. About sensors, this is not even mobile. This is basically just Internet of Things or sensors everywhere kind of thing. It's a more of an internet thing, if I'm in my mind, where data flows into the web and it creates data sets that are not driven by people typing or something like that, and you generate amazing value out of it. But mobile is just the fact that you have connectivity in that case.
Well, I think the physicality of that point is important, and you're downplaying it, which is that we use a metaphor of an iceberg, that 90% of these services are invisible to us, right? They're in data centers, and it's software, and it's remote. And as it becomes sort of spread and less visible to us, the piece that we can touch and communicate with becomes more and more of a sort of a talisman or a central focus point. And that I think is something that Apple and Samsung have sort of understood and celebrate. And that physicality, I think that actually becomes even more important as the services become.
I don't really understand what you're saying, but basically the only value in the world is the web, right? If you don't have connectivity, you're lost. Forget about it, right? And yes, this is the primary embodiment of consuming the web, right? And that's why mobile is so important. Right? You can do it through an app or through, there's very few standalone apps that are of any value, and those are games, right? And there's a very important special cases, but most of the other apps have to reflect some kind of a cloud or service. Mm-hmm. So I think I agree with you. What kind of physicality are you referring to?
Well, but just that we need this point. It becomes so mysterious and so esoteric that...
how can I view the web without something to view it with? And that's going to be some kind of a screen. Yeah.
It means we're relying on Samsung and your peers to keep making these beautiful things.
We're actually I'm just thinking other types of devices emerge, right? So if you look at Dropcam, Dropcams are cameras that are capturing video, will actually archive any movement of data up in the cloud, right? But again, call it what you want. It's a device that is tied into a protocol set, and it can actually take that data that's collected up to some cloud service that you can watch through your web browser or through an app on your iPad. And I kind of wonder if we might see more of those types of devices, to your point, that are sub-functionality of the phone. And then this kind of comes back to a comment I made earlier, which we'll see if this plays out or not, but the same way we had mainframes, I wonder if there's a similar analogy and then eventually that led to larger servers and PCs and laptops. I wonder if that happens with the smartphone.
Well, you see the polarization that happened between the small and almost wearable, which is the phone nearby, not really wearable, and the cloud. So you see that thing kind of separating. Same thing it could happen again in terms of the axes of environment versus body, right? So you can see how technology kind of fills up that continuum. The phones were always going to be there. The sensors embedded in the environment will always going to be there. The real tricky question is what's going to be on your body? What's going to be even more intimate, more addictive, more close to you than a phone?
And I think there's an interesting implication.
I'm very negative on that. Yeah.
I think it was an interesting implication of all these sensors, all these types of technologies.
Yeah.
I have a 5-year-old, and I'm thinking that there's so many things that are trying to capture our attention. And I didn't have maybe all those distractions as a child. I had Apple II Plus, maybe that was my major distraction. But I kind of wondered the implication for learning. I mean, there was a recent article that came out that, I mean, to really do kind of deep learning and thinking and real assimilation of concepts requires focus. It's longer than a minute. And I wonder, how this actually plays out as this generation, this kind of first generation of just pure these types of technologies kind of play through.
Yeah, I mean, I share your concern at the sort of the peekaboo worldview. Everything is in bite-sized, 30-second packaged cans. The flip side of that, though, is things that we used to think people were smart when they knew things, when they knew facts.
Facts, right.
And now everybody knows a fact. Factual arguments are gone. You just look it up on your phone and you have an answer. So now we think people who are smart are people who can connect concepts and think, which is probably a better definition of smart. And so I look at, again, I have a 5-year-old too, and I look at him and his mates and how they interact. And yeah, I think this sort of whole concept of how they learn and how they think is going to be different.
Yeah, the web is data. It's like the Google view, optimistic view of the web, and connection to data is nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with that. In the beginning of 19th century, I wasn't there, but I've been told that people frowned upon books. They said books are putting crazy ideas into kids, and it's really destructive. It's not a good thing for them. They need to run, and I don't know. There was that view. I'm not going to go all the way back to Plato, if you remember that quote, but never mind that. Then there was TV. I'm a product of the TV generation. I watched a lot of TV as a kid, and I learned a lot about the world from TV. Bad things, good things, everything, right? And Hollywood. And it was frowned upon. They try to restrict my TV intake. I would never have it. I would always go to the TV and watch as much TV as I can. My children, they can't get out of these touch devices. That's all they do. And I don't care.
Well, how do you see how do you see mobile innovation evolving worldwide? I mean, what we've been talking about, I think that's a sort of a U.S.-centric view, probably, with the wearables and everything,
Right. In the late 60s, there was a bunch of research done by a group of anthropologists around these cultural universals, right, which are common attributes to a large number of civilizations that have been studied in the past. So, let's say the last 150 years, and these things have not changed. And I'm just thinking about a comment you made earlier, of how we reach that next to the global level. And you look at things like messaging and communication; these things are not going to go away. Yes, there are cultural differences, but some of these things are so core to just us as human beings. That's not going to change.
Yeah, I think there are some use cases that are pretty interesting. One is just the whole around money. So for a lot of people, their phone is their first interaction with the formal financial system. They don't have banking, they only had cash in the past. Now they can transact and send money to each other. And so think about that, right? This is a great way to sort of spread saving and transfer of wealth. The second is just the role of education. It's thinking back to some research we did in Brazil, where we met people in circumstances that you wouldn't really expect education to be a top priority, but they were, through their mobile devices, accessing content that was allowing them to study, history or technology languages. And so just sort of prioritizing those kinds of use cases. Another example was people who were doing commerce on their phones. It was, again, very unexpected for us. It was a street market vendor who was making purses, and it looked like something that you'd make and sell in a street stall. She actually had a website and was selling, and of course it makes sense, as we were saying earlier, the tools are there, it's very easy for people to make sites. But here was a whole level of commerce or e-commerce that we had just not expected to see.
And Guy, at Samsung, have you seen?
Samsung is a very respectful company. We really, as its core, as its DNA, really respects cultures. Being from, Samsung is from Korea, so they're very culture aware. And that actually dictated in the past the structure of the portfolio and the structure of the business, because we had regionalized, we made phones for India and Japan and
they were all different?
Very different. And Then this arrogant company came and made one phone. And that's a very dark, almost fascist view of the world, that we're all the same. And we actually argued, not we, I didn't have the, I was shutting up in the corner, but other people told Steve Jobs that other people are different, you know, and there's different cultures, and the Europeans and the Russians, and he just did, I said, I don't buy it. We're all the same. We all want the same things. We don't need false choices. We don't need 3 types of ice cream, right? We don't need too many cars. Toyota makes like 14 types of cars. Why? Just make 1 or 2. You know, we all want to have Mercedes-Benz 360, but we can't afford it, right? But on mobile, just make 1. And that was a shocking vertical to the horizontal that is Samsung. And I've been in both places, and my formative years were at Apple, so I kind of, at first I resisted that view because I'm a nice guy, but then it works. It really works. We all want to be special by owning the same thing that we all have. It's unbelievable. It started with iPods. I'm going to elevate myself by owning something very special that everybody has. I don't understand how the world works, but it's true. So there are companies who are stuck in the false economy, the false choice. More is more. Some of it, like Samsung, are tied to it from legacy business models because they push to carriers. So each carrier wants different, and you can see lately that Samsung actually makes less. There's the Galaxy Note and the Galaxy phone, and there's 2 major ones within a sea of other little lesser phones. So Apple is right in terms of.
And the Galaxy Note is similar across the world, or is it tailored in specific markets?
It's not. It's funny to say that. There are like 8 or 10 different models of Galaxy Note. They look the same roughly, and they're regionalized. But the marketing message, the soul of the product, the cultural message is one. You don't need to call it Note S or, you know.
Right.
So it's an interesting transition. I believe that Samsung did not finish that kind of realization.
So one of the running themes that we've been talking about here in terms of mobile is the data that it generates about us, and also the sort of experiences that will increasingly be generated by mobile devices. That brings to mind a lot of stuff about data and privacy. And you know, I know that you guys have thought about this and whether or not it's an inhibiting factor in our mobile evolution. Tim, I'm going to start with you because I know that you at Frog have done some studies looking at the attitude towards mobile and privacy in the last couple of years.
Yeah, we think a lot about this. The flip side of having a device on you all the time that's tracking you all the time is that it knows a lot about you and it's generating information. And a lot of the really interesting and valuable services rely on this 2-sided business model where they give you a great service and in exchange you give them your information, which they sell to advertisers or find some other way to monetize. They betray you. Yeah. And so we wanted to understand, are people aware of this trade? And also, what do they think of it? How do they, you know, if you had to put a dollar value to it, how would they value this? So we did an experiment, and we showed people 2 different products. You know, a web service, let's say email, from a brand, let's say Yahoo, and it collects a little bit of personal data about you, and then exactly the same product, you know, Yahoo from email, that collects no data. And of course, most rational people said I would pick the service that collects no data. And then we said, okay, we're going to change it up a little. Same service, same brands, same information, but now we want 50 cents a month to use your email. And we watched to see how many people swapped from the paid version to the free version. And then we changed it up again by changing the brands, changing the service, changing the price, and changing the types of information that we wanted to collect. And by doing the math on the back end, we sort of could figure out how people value the different tiers of data. And what came out of this was that there's broadly 3 different tiers of information. At the top are your government identity, your social security number in the US, and your financial information. And you value that very highly because you know that bad things happen when people take that information. And then at the bottom is the stuff that you almost don't value, you value very low, at a low rate, and that's things like your name and your email address and your physical address. your age, your sex, the kind of demographic information that you may have filled in on a magazine card, years ago. It's the sort of information you give away very freely. But the stuff in the middle is what I've called the digital exhaust, and we should probably think of a better name for it. But this is the information that you generate as you make your way around modern life using applications and carrying a cell phone. And it's things like your location information, it's your search history, it's what you've bought, where you've been, who you've communicated with, who you've phoned. And a lot of our clients and a lot of people in the mobile ecosystem depend on that mid-layer of information for their businesses. And it turns out we don't value it that highly. We're prepared to give it up for fairly trivial benefits. We're running that study again now because I want to see what happened after the NSA leaks and sort of the greater awareness. Have people changed in their perception? But my hypothesis is still that we don't value that. It's a fair trade where we feel for some minor convenience and some interesting applications and services, we're pretty happy to give up that data.
Yeah, I don't think it's fair, but it's acceptable culturally because people are not really thinking about it. It doesn't have to be that way. It's that way because the internet used to run on the browser. And in the browser, it's this really hectic platform that everybody, like you said, it's seconds of attention span, and there's no monetization solution beside the standard model of ads. And they click here, so do that. I want to get a piece and finder fee and all these very, very hectic situation. That is because of the browser, right? Now, when we take the web and we put it in mobile, it doesn't have to be that way. It just doesn't have to be that way, right? We can find a more civilized ways to monetize our users that are not millisecond. Relationships are really bad when they're very fast, like on the road, right? I'm not going to let you in. I'm going to be rude on the road. That's the reason why people are rude on the road, because they see each other for seconds. But if I'm with you for an hour, I'm probably going to be much more nicer to you.
So
right?
do you see examples?
That's short term.
Do you see examples of companies that have a more civilized approach?
I think this is right. I think and this is something that a lot of marketing heads are struggling with, which they're used in terms of CPM and like online advertising in the traditional world.
It's pretty
much of which is transitioned to, I think, tablets. But I think for mobile, and I sit on the board of Inmobi, which is one of the largest private ad networks for mobile, and actually built the team and the infrastructure around advertising at Twitter. And I think what you're seeing is that these companies that are building more native content as ads tend to be doing quite well. Whether that be Twitter or Facebook, where it's part of the experience, it's not jarring.
Right.
And ideally, it feels like a recommendation,
right.
like you were referring to earlier. But I think that coming to privacy at large, I think users in general just really hate surprises. So I think it's when apps or services do something that you didn't anticipate with your information, that they get really frustrated and potentially leave or get really mad. And I think if you tell them up front what you're going to do with it and you're consistent with that, I think we're going to just see more and more transparency, or people willing to give up a lot of information with the assumption that they're getting something back in return.
Yeah. So thinking beyond the browser, right? Because you can have a browser in mobile, right? But it's not a true. I'm not that familiar with it. Just kidding. The thing is, the phone is a tool to discover the world. And we just a little bit beyond what we know today, just kind of the things that we want to know, and to do that, you need to know you so we can recommend to you. If you like jazz, maybe you'll appreciate something similar, and that basically take your hand to a discovery journey. And the slippery slope of monetization is right there. You know what I mean? Because as you learn about the world, you're going to consume things. But it can be a gentle, soft sell that is much more effective in the long run, we believe, because as you said, nobody's doing it, because we live in this uncivilized times of, I hope transitory, of the browser, the primacy of the browser.
I don't know if I totally understand the browser analogy. I think maybe what you're referring to is what would be called a headless browser, where there's no UI.
Yeah.
Because the data is still coming from the web.
Absolutely, but not through a browser
that
the user is
providing to the user experience. It's just that they're not using Safari. It's kind of interesting. Like I noticed that I actually kind of still use Safari on my iPhone, but I don't use it that much because you normally would just go directly to an app, right?
Exactly.
And you're getting these silos of apps, and like, what does that mean for the web at large? And I think it's the headless browser.
Exactly. Right? So you chose to go to that app, and the app is not going to thrash you around, and there's no, and it's a more relaxed longer term kind of interaction. Think about magazines, how you have this curated content that you opt in and out of because you know which magazine you're going to read, Yachts or something else. That's a much more organized way of doing this.
Well, this comes into kind of a larger trend that we're seeing, which is the concept of the homepage is really going away.
Yes.
The homepage has been decomposed into smaller, bite-sized pieces of content that are actually oftentimes consumed in your mobile phone.
Yeah.
Right? So it's web content. It just happens to be a piece of an app,
Exactly.
or a piece of different pieces that are assembled within an app. But it's kind of rarely the case that you go to a homepage.
So let me ask one last question before we turn to questions. Again, back to the sort of data question. Collecting all this data, what will happen? What is going to be happening? Is there going to be any innovation around the data that is being collected? I mean, is it just that it's going to be used to sell ads to all of us in the future? Or I think Mike,
I think we talked a little about this.
Yeah.
I mean, I think again, if you look at just data at large, we've got now in the world 2.8 zettabytes of data, right? Half of which I believe was generated in the last year. But what's interesting, only 1% of that's actually been analyzed. And in 2020, we're going to have 40 zettabytes. So we have this huge amount, and a majority of the data is going to be generated by machines. And so I think it's very early on, applying concepts like deep learning to all this information that we're assembling. Right now, we're in this phase where we're amassing tons of data. We almost have this data obesity problem in a lot of companies. Let's store more. It's really efficient. Let's store more and more data because we don't know how we're going to use it, but we want to store it. And and this is what we're looking at on the investment side too. What are the opportunities in the companies that are creating kind of the opportunities of leveraging insights of that data that's being amassed, and hopefully building, I think, a rich set of services and products for both enterprises and consumers.
I think that the primary use we see being made by app makers and device makers who collect information is to make their product better, right? They're tailoring the product to you so your experience of it is somehow richer and better. Then there's a subset of those who are selling it for advertising, and as you said, that can be jarring if it's done incorrectly. But if you think about the ones who are using it to make the product better, in some ways they're allowing us to give up more and more control because they know more and more about us. And so it has to be done well. If it's done badly, if it tells me, if it asks me, am I driving to work on Saturday morning when I open up my navigation app, that's done badly. But if it asks me on a Friday morning, that's a good assumption, and it just allows me to hit one button and then I can drive to work. So I think we'll see more of that, of using algorithms to understand who the user is. And then our phones or the services that we get through them can make more and more decisions on our behalf and tailor the experience as we navigate our way around the world to us in a more effective way.
I think that data is really powerful, and it's going to be used for everything. For good reasons, like you say. Good people will use it for good reasons. Bad people will use it for nefarious reasons. People will try to make money. It's going to be everything. The governments may have a great study to help our health with that data, or for things that are less positive. It's just power. It's knowing someone is extremely useful in predicting what they would want, what they're going to do, and that you can use those insights. The closeness to someone in any number of ways. We, as Samsung, as an OEM, don't want to fall into that precedent of the web in using that data. We want love. We want premium, right? We want loyalty. The only metric that we really care about is resale, right? After this device breaks, please buy us. Not only please, but we're going to lock you in the data sets, but that's the goal, right? Because we want the money. Again,
right.
We're greedy like everybody else, but not on a millisecond kind of crazy, hectic way, but 18-month kind of cycle.
Fundamentally, not
which is much more, but it's just more civilized.
Absolutely.
Right? Because I have a relationship with you, I'm respecting you.
Okay, great. Let's turn to some of the questions from the audience, some provocative questions. What is the state of mobile innovation to help the nearly 3 billion people who live on $2 a day to lift themselves out of poverty? Is this something that is on the horizon?
It's just technology, right? It's not the answer for everything. I believe that access to the web is inherently empowering. right? Right? Because it gives you access to markets and to education and to other people. And it makes things cheaper, right? In the long term, technology is efficiency, right? Things that were hard and expensive yesterday are, quickly becoming much more accessible to everybody. It's true that people that are in this thing to make money, him and me and you, are not really targeting people with no money, right? But there is, the side effect of our work is about more power for everybody. So it's a little bit philosophical, but I believe in it.
I mean, you're certainly right. I think one of the interesting things that's being enabled by this technology is around education.
Right. Yeah.
And we're investors in Coursera, and it's amazing to see how many of these university courses are consumed outside the U.S. I don't know what all the socioeconomic kind of consumers are, but you're seeing that as education is getting democratized and getting wider access, and you're combining this with hopefully more technology access through various means, that will have a pretty wider. College
education. You pay so much money to this institution to give you a diploma. God knows what you're learning there. Nobody measures it. It's a pyramid scheme in a sense of, oh, I've been there, so give me opportunity. It's extremely hard to get in. It's broken, right? What's going to fix that? Not mobile, but the web, right? So I hope that when my kids are going to be in that age, that it's going to be accessible and measurable, and I really love that area as a way of really providing knowledge to people, right? Not just accreditation. So I couldn't agree more.
And I think it's certainly an area that carriers are looking at and studying. We have a studio in South Africa, and we do a fair bit of work in sub-Saharan Africa. And we had 2 or 3 programs which were funded by telecommunications companies in the region, looking at how do we provide phones and services to people who are living on $2 or less. And what does that look like? Well, of course, they want to make money. And if you can figure out the right services, the right way to deliver that, if you can make the economics work, I think it's a tremendous force for good.
Okay, Guy, we have a question for you from a very feisty audience member. So with all this knowledge about the user experience, how could Samsung produce a useless product like Galaxy Gear smartwatch?
Yeah, that's a very good question. We are right now in a Cambrian explosion that is out of desperation. I said that we're plateauing, we don't know what to do. We want to do something, we want to try something. So you're going to see a lot of experimentation that is going to lead to nowhere, just like the Cambrian explosion, with a big, huge, painful, bubble. I don't know how to call it. It's a try in creating a new platform, right? It's not going to work, right? In general, wearables are a graveyard, just a graveyard. It's a fool's errand. There's two problems with them. Very weak killer apps or no killer apps. Very long tail of value that is really getting missed, and a huge fashion barrier, right? Huge fashion barrier. You're getting so close to me that you're starting to represent me. The phone doesn't, really. But a watch? We wear watches. Why do we wear watches? Who needs watches? Just to reflect my own identity as a fashion, right? And that collision is just, it's not going to work.
I don't know if I agree. I mean, certainly, watch is another sensor. I tend to think that, you have your opinions on the watch or Google Glass, but
yes.
It doesn't feel like it's going to be a graveyard. It's not clear what the next sensor that people will actually wear be, but I mean, I actually don't wear a watch because I use my phone. And I think there's actually a lot of people, especially I think the generation below us, that are doing that.
Right.
So we need to actually justify why to wear a watch. And we haven't seen the apps because these platforms are not out there for creative developers to go build interesting experiences.
It's deeper than that. It's worse than that. The killer,
of course,
the killer of wearables are these, right? The incremental value between something you put here and something that you addicted to it here is not enough to float this,
And
And-
I agree with Guy. The fashion barrier there is just huge.
Insurmountable.
If you line up all the wearables that have come out, it tends to be a very masculine aesthetic.
Well, that's
it's
because
quite,
of the engineers.
It's quite geeky. It appeals to the sort of
But
bi-coastal
actually,
alpha geek
okay,
set.
let's move off the watch. Let's go to the Jawbone Up.
The glass?
I actually think that it's
Which one? Which one?
The Jawbone Up.
This one, yeah.
Yeah,
It's a good one.
I think people like to actually wear it and to not just track information, but it sends a message, hey, I care about fitness, and I'm trying to take care of myself. I think people like that.
I'm not sure it fits on every occasion,
No,
though.
it's
It's not,
They made it very, very neutral on purpose, and it's hard to do, and that's why it's more successful than others. But it's not important. It's just a sensor. It's not going to threaten the primacy of the handset.
But the watch
so
is
who
just
cares?
a sensor as well.
No, so what? So who cares? It's just a little thing that doesn't matter in the in
So
the future
is
of computing.
Samsung into investing things that are in graveyards?
We are trying everything. Yeah, Samsung is a company that is not Apple. Apple is a laser beam. They are putting a lot of focus behind one target. Samsung is the horizontal to that vertical. They're trying things. When they don't know, they do both. And there's a lot of power and a lot of success in putting all of your chip everywhere. You're going to win, right? And it's not inherently bad to do, right? It's just that if you're asking me if the watch is going to go anywhere, no way.
I don't know if the watch will be, but I think there will be wearables that do.
So talk about glass, right?
I don't think. Okay, let's talk about glass. Let's talk about glass in the enterprise. So I think everyone always thinks about these wearables as a consumer, but if you're in the warehouse, I think there's interesting applications emerging to help that warehouse worker find that product.
That's a
help a
limited
doctor
cultural impact.
actually transcribe a patient's comments on his or her condition.
I'll submit to you that in the enterprise, if you're like a oil or geologist, engineer, yes, you will wear all kind of funny things on your face, but that's not important culturally. We're talking about, and mobile is affecting all of us. My mom, my cousin who's 15, my daughter is 7. It's not important. Now you're investing in a niche market that is culturally just not important. So I agree with you. It's gonna rock that world. But nobody will put on their face something that separates them from other people, that makes you look like a pirate because it's asymmetric. And people wear it to be nerdy. They try to be nerdy, so they do that to be cool. But it's not going to catch on with anybody.
Yeah, I don't know what the wearable will be, but that wearable may be inside your body. It may not have anything to do with fashion.
If you make a good, balanced, this is a wearable. It's a piece of technology, it's wearable. And a lot of people wear glasses, and some of us wear it just for shaders or something, for fashion. If they can make it something like this, which they can't, because volumetrically there's no battery in there, you can forget about that until we have a breakthrough on these really fundamental forces. This is a great platform, because visually, it's always between you and the world in a way that doesn't bother anybody today.
Let's go to the car as a platform. Do you think Tesla is to some extent an electronics company as much as it is an automobile?
It's a car company.
Okay.
Makes
I think
cars.
it is. I think it'll be interesting to see if they evolve into a platform company, where if they actually opened up the dashboard for building applications and services. I don't know, but that would be interesting. But I think I agree that ultimately still a car company.
Regulation is really tight.
They're pushing an interesting boundary, though. We had a lead of design from a Japanese auto company visit us, and he spoke. They have an 80, 90-year history of building these beautiful physical objects, these forms of cars, and it's sort of a desirable thing. They've perfected that craft. And his fear was that as the car becomes self-driving or more automated, the interior experience and the UI of the car becomes more important. And that's not something that they've had traditional skills and competencies in. I think Tesla's really given serious consideration and thought to that. I would agree they're still a car company, but they're a first example of thinking beyond. And I think the other automakers will then react and respond to how do we think about gesture and voice and control and interaction with the car.
And they're not the first, right? BMW and Mercedes have been pretty
Have been working in that sphere, yeah.
Yeah, but they're the first in deploying it on all of their cars, as opposed to doing it just as a
True.
And going back to your self-driving car and commute, at that point, I think you want a very different experience inside the
No,
car.
I agree. Yeah.
So I think that I know the answer to this question, which is a part of this Tesla question, but we want to know if it makes sense for Apple to buy Tesla. Apparently an analyst suggested it last week.
Why did he do that?
I don't know.
Maybe because Apple is an industrial design hardware manufacturer that could make a beautiful, beautiful car for a lot of money. But in that case, Tesla is if you've seen a Tesla, it's so well made.
Yeah.
It's an object of desire. It's like Johnny Ives designed it. But I think it's a really superficial product kind of insight, as opposed to the fundamentals of the business are totally not there. Even Steve Jobs would not have done that, you know? And Tim Cook would never do that. He's much more.
So a good question about how much of the expanded use of mobile devices is dependent on an increased investment in wireless and broadband infrastructure. What is that? Is investment in infrastructure something that will hold us back from a broader wireless future, mobile future?
It depends. I mean, you look at the announcement that Google made with balloons and providing wider internet access.
Right.
You know, I've been waiting for the carriers to start clamping down on the network consumption of apps, and that hasn't necessarily happened. I mean, when you're an app developer, you're thinking about the experience, but you're certainly not thinking about optimizing oftentimes for sometimes power. Sometimes power actually you do, because people complain about power. But no one really complains if you're using up your unlimited data plan. And I just wonder at some point the carriers start really throttling back on that.
It's different around the world, right? Because the
sure.
US model is very unique in that, but it's a leading model. I mean, the US is extremely leading mobile-wise. And connectivity is key, absolutely. I mean, without connectivity, we're nowhere. We need to be connected to the web. So.
And, yeah, there's a lot of innovation and thought going on at every level. So companies like Cisco optimizing for mobile web and web content delivery. And we see that all the way up through the carriers investing in their networks. I think they have enough cash flow from our data plans. I mean, just think about what you pay to the phone company now compared to 10 years ago, compared to 30 years ago when you paid them nothing for your mobile. So there's still a lot of money in that system that's allowing them to make interesting investments.
Yeah, great. A question about what sorts of disruptive innovation we can expect to see in mobile technology to address social challenges like the environment and human trafficking.
I'll give you just some small examples from our own work at Frog. We had an internal wearables contest last year, and our Shanghai and we all focused on local problems. You know, what's a problem in your local geo? And Shanghai has a pollution problem. If you go there in summer, it's just awful. And people wear masks, and so we put sensors in the mask, we put a radio in the mask, and then you can suddenly get a crowdsourced view of what's the air quality in different parts of the city. I think examples like that of spreading, using sensor technology and the fact that everybody has this wonderful radio in their pocket to spread the democratization of that environmental sensing and tracking.
I think we're already living in a world where the mobile camera, video camera, is already shaking the world with Syria and other places. There's no way of hiding bad stuff around the world where if you have a mobile industry. I mean, in North Korea, you don't. So that's why we're not, getting very, very upset about that. So the same way that TV brought the world to people's homes, mobile cameras are true. And Twitter, by the way, right?
Yeah, it's really that is the town square. I mean,
and it is a web
really
thing.
Democratizing actually almost governance.
It's a force.
For a lot of
it's a force to reckon with, and definitely it's a web thing, but on a mobile device in a very democratized way. It's already here.
And a last question. What innovations are improving accessibility to mobile around the world? Sort of another question about the...
Accessibility in what sense? Social accessibility?
It doesn't specify. But it's sort of, I guess the question is, how equitable, what will make mobile innovation get into the hands of people that don't currently have it? Are there any innovations to speak of around that?
I think that today discovery of the existing value, that is the app value, is extremely manual. And it's not the best way. So innovations in the area of discovery of apps and services, that I can't get into details, but a more organic, crowdsourced way, as opposed to me going to some company's web store in the sky and selecting whatever they're promoting, would allow people to be exposed to the confusing and fragmented value that exists today in mobile. Because it's hard. It's hard to know that there's a service that can help me if you're just a normal person.
I think it's sort of Internet of Things combining with handsets. And I'll give you a concrete example. A company in Kenya called Kilimo Salama offers grain insurance, so seed insurance. You know, when a farmer buys seed, if they have a bad year, it actually knocks them back for 5 or 6 years because your seed's wiped out. You don't save any from your harvest. But for a few percentage on top of the price of the seed, you can buy insurance. That works well in developed countries because someone from the insurance company can come out and check, you know, did you have bad weather and how's your soil? This company in Kenya does it by putting in a weather vane with a radio on it. It relies on the cellular network. And if you live within 15 kilometers of this weather vane, they have an automated system that allows them to figure out, did you have bad weather that year and would your crops have failed? And then the farmer has a cell phone using a combination of text messages. He can get the seed insurance payout if he has a bad year. So I think it's examples like that where you use fairly low-cost sensor technology, overlay it with an information layer of weather forecasting and weather patterns, give people access to phones. You don't need very much power or very long use of that phone. You just need enough to make those brief communications. And I think, you know, that's just a point example, one of many. But I think we'll see a lot of those. That changes how people live their lives and how they access services.
Okay. And just to close, maybe you guys can spend a minute just sort of blue skying a little bit about how bright or not the mobile future might be, or are we just stuck, Guy?
I say we're very bright. I mean, I think, you know, I think companies have historically had like mobile teams, and I think that's going to go away because mobile is just so pervasive. Right. It's not really even an area. Yeah. And I think, again, we also have to distinguish, I think, tablets from phones. Obviously, both are mobile entities, but those are very different. And so I just think that term will be, you know, used in maybe forums like this, but it won't be used in companies as a distinguishing aspect, because that will be, first and foremost, what you build first, if you're building a product. And then you will certainly think about the web. And I think one of the most impactful things around Instagram was that it was the first mobile-only company that, you know, exited for $1 billion, and at the time they were only on iOS. I mean, they were on Android for like a couple days, and that's just amazing. And I think that's really impacted a lot of entrepreneurs that we see with how they think about building products.
Yeah, the primacy of the mobile platform in accessing the value of the web is the future, and we want to finish this era of the app era that started in 2007. And even Google wants to. You know, Google is stuck with this success that is so foreign to its core, which is Android native. It's really, even the people who developed it are very, very similar to Apple people. And they have Chrome OS, and they have true web technologies that fail to pick up, and they're torn, right? And we're looking for that day where there's going to be a new way to consume web value, not through app value. So that would allow us to customize, to personalize, because we can know you better than all of the apps that you have together, right? And that inefficiency, we can't wait for it to go away, so we can really go forward with what phones can do to people through knowing them.
Yeah, and I think I look forward to the phone becoming sort of my identity token in the world, and allowing the physical world to orient itself around me in a unique way, in the way that, you know, when you go to a browser now, to any website, the content and the way it looks is different. And I think an early example would be something like what Disney has done in their Disney World Park, where it's not a phone, it's a bracelet, but it becomes your key, it becomes your fast pass, it opens your hotel door. If you allow it, you know, they can know who you are and can have a personalized experience. Now that's an example of a very contained environment. They own the entire infrastructure, so they can distribute the computing and sensing into the environment around them. It's a lot harder to do out on the street in San Francisco here because we're in the wild. But I think combining those sort of infrastructure investments with the kinds of apps and tools we've been talking about, we'll see that digital experience move more and more into our physical world.
Well, Tim, thank you. I'm definitely taking my kids to Disneyland for that experience next. And I want to thank all our panelists. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Tim.